have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast. I'm your host Coale, and with me as always I have my good friend and co-host Aaron. Aaron,
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you survived the Purge, buddy.
Yeah, so far the Purge continues every day.
For the next 4 years.
Yeah. Well.
So we are watching The Purge, which was very apt, I feel like, especially given that, like between March 21st and March 22nd, that's usually when the actual purge occurs and everything. But yeah, I mean, I guess for a recap, so far, I from what I'm gathering with both our consensus is we love the idea of the purge.
Yeah.
The execution of the purge has wavered between film to film, with the first one being like, okay, then the second one being, okay.
Yeah, interesting choices. I feel like it's a corny ass premise, kind of a little bit, but it also some of the execution has been, that way. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just, it's so bad because like, we've talked about it and everything, that we love the idea of it and everything, and multiple films being made off it just makes sense.
Yeah.
But I am starting to waver a little bit on how good this third one's going to be onward forward. It's like, is there going to be a point where it's just like they're out of gas?
True.
They ain't got nothing left in the tank.
And the title of this one, Election Year, is interesting to me. I did actually look up. I was like, when did this come out? And it was July of 2016.
Very, very apt.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, because I don't know. Again, I don't know much about this film. I don't know. Are they going to be parodying like these franchises has always been political in a sense, but like now I feel like it's going to be more directly political with this sort of title and subject matter. But yeah, like I wonder what it's going to be about. Because is it going to be? Because at this point in 2016, political history, I don't know if you guys remember, nobody expected Donald Trump to win. So I don't know if it's about that, or if it's about 8 years of Obama, or if it's about, I don't know, sort of the conditions of under the Bush administration. Like, we're getting a little political here because this is, I'm anticipating some sort of political commentary in this movie. But
in all honesty, if they do have political commentary, I would actually be very interested.
Yeah. Do you think it's not even at that level? They're just like, it's an election year, so we're making this movie election year.
Yeah, okay. I don't know, because so far in the series, right, like the first one focuses on like a rich family home that is the one that's made money off of the purge by selling these security systems and focusing on that. The second one is focusing on just the overall city, like kind of what you were hoping to see in the first one initially. Right. It's like, I want to see the city purge, like what's going on in the big city and everything else. But
each of them is about that class divide, right? It's like essentially political about, like, there's always the stories of the people that are, safe behind their security systems in the purge, the like wealthy elite, and then there's the people that actually suffer the consequences of the purge, which are the poor people in the streets that are getting slaughtered or whatever. There's always been like a political undertone, or like rather like that's based into the concept itself that they explore to various degrees while still trying to make a movie that's marketable for everybody without being like explicitly political.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm afraid of, because like, I don't know, like I said, I'm not even a big like, jam politics into films, because sometimes I think you can absolutely kill a film entirely in the artistic integrity.
You don't want it to just be like, this is a PSA kind of thing instead of an enjoyable movie experience. Yeah. But
also at the same point, I know a lot of times big studios don't want to make something that alienating. Usually you'll see something like that from, directors or studios that are already used to putting out content like that. Right. So with this being, I still believe a Blumhouse production and everything, I don't know how deep they'll go into it, but I would like to see kind of more literally on the political side of it. But granted, people are literally watching the Purge films and everything for the horror and killing and everything. So I'm curious. I don't know. It's one of those things that I'm definitely a little hopeful, I guess, that it's still mildly entertaining.
Yeah.
like the bar's set midway, I would say.
No.
I definitely kind of expect a little bit out of it, but at the same point,
I'm not expecting cinema after watching the first two. But I'm just
Yes.
wondering, surely because art imitates life. That's what I'm going to be looking for in this run. I'm surely they're going to be referencing whatever the political situation was at the time to some extent.
yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's a weird mid expectation, I guess, for me as well.
Yeah.
Where again, I'm like Aaron, not expecting absolute cinema or whatever. I'm just expecting this is another great idea in a film that has a great idea as the premise.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only one way to find out whether this film will go over the bar or hit their bar. Wait, no, hit the bar. Hit their head on the bar, or just absolutely dig way below even the ground.
Yeah.
So
It could go either way.
in all
Gotta
honesty,
find out.
yeah, I know it's time to see who won on this election year. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I sure am excited. America's going to be great again. Aren't you excited, gang?
No, I'm not excited. It sucks, Dad. This country's gonna suck for 4 years.
Oh, come on, Shelley. We've learned that women can be anything, except for president.
And we are back from watching Purge election year. And Aaron,
Yeah.
how do you feel about it?
I'll give you my quick summary right now. It had all of the cringe and, cornballness that you expect from the Purge franchise, but with a much tighter message that was also much more political than I think even the previous two entries, because I think it's been ramping up a little bit, and this one is... Nobody can tell me this one, election year, is not political. It was even more political than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's it is sadly very prophetic.
Yeah,
with
well,
its film.
Yeah, it's it goes to show that these are problems that have existed in our country for a long time. However, at the date that this came out, 2016, at the time, if I watched it then, might have been tempted to be like, all right, we're getting a little crazy with it. You know what I mean? But it is sad to see that, almost a decade later, not only is pretty much every messaging point that they had in that movie still extremely true, it is even more obvious and out there and public and true than it was even at the time of making that film. So
yeah, which is so funny and kind of sad. Like, I know people do the same thing with like films like Idiocracy, where at the time like, oh, that's really stupid, and then they're like, actually no, that's kind of
they're actually kind of way on the nose. Even like, I mean, there's definitely some scenes that they, like, as far as from an acting Hollywood cinema perspective, are, like, go way over the top. But even those scenes that I would have thought were way over the top in 2016, some of those are, like, I recognize now. I'm like, if I was sitting watching this a decade ago, I would have been like, all right, the Nazi shock trooper squads that are funded by the government, that are, like, with the SS tattoos on his face and shit. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. But nowadays, I'm like, no, that's actually literally our government right now, and they're not even trying to hide it. So it's sad, but also like kind of like, okay, well, they were on the money with basically everything they're saying.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. Well, I guess it's sad and weird to see it be more culturally appropriate in the year 2025.
Yeah.
Than probably even if it was in 2016 and everything.
Absolutely.
So...
I mean, the writing's been on the wall for a long time. I mean, it's one of those situations where we're going to get political this podcast. At least I am. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, America's been the baddies for a while. And, this movie that's about government-sponsored day where they encourage their citizens to kill each other so that the rich can profit. I mean, it's one of those situations that's kind of always been the foundation principles of America, and they just kind of adapted it for the modern age, showcased some of the more concerning elements that were concerning in 2016, and unfortunately things have just gotten worse since then. Yeah,
and one of the other things I think I can applaud the film on, like I did the previous film, is that they are still running hot with this idea, and they are exploring every avenue of stuff, because
Yeah.
they even just like how the world views the Purge
Absolutely.
and everything.
Some
and
of the little lore details and like, all right, these people are these are the caravans that go out and help people. These are like just the logistics of the Purge, like the businesses that prop up. You get a little moment of like the guy doing the bring out your dead cart ass thing
Yeah.
from Monty Python, but it's like this is the business where they're all right. We're gonna haul bodies out and pay for the just how the economy forms around this incredible hyper-violent day.
Yeah, so I guess we'll dive more into like overall like as a movie of its own how it stands, but I mean so far it's like pretty chill right now, pretty chill talking about it and everything.
Yeah, I
So-
enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I stand by my prediction from before we watched the movie, which is that it's not cinema. It's not high art, but it is very apt, and I
Yeah.
think that's probably a lot of what I'll focus on. But.
In all honesty, with me and my bar analogy, like whether this film hits the bar or not, I think it grazes over the bar. Like
yeah.
like the bar that was said, I grazed over and I'm like, okay, I'm satisfied.
I would be there with you. I expected the film to be worse than it was for me. Yeah.
I was hoping that it would be still solid, but I feel like again the problem with franchises is you'll have like the first one, which is huge acclamation and everything else, but I feel like so far, without getting into like rating territory, I feel like they're still hitting the mark pretty well. They're still on the dark board and everything, so that's kind of unfortunately rare to see and everything with a series and everything else, but I do think it just stems from that they do have good ideas.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a good movie and everything else, that's where we'll dive into the nitty gritty and everything. But I guess one of the things we should talk about is more so the main focus of this film. So as you've heard Aaron and I joke multiple times, the Purge election year does take place during, spoiler alert, an election year. And one of the people that is running for president, Senator Charlie Roan, was a victim of a Purge incident that, spoiler alert, wiped out her whole family, and since then she dived into the world of politics, 18 years working at it to try to put an end to the Purge. With that being said, and as Aaron and I have pointed out in the previous Purge films, especially the 1%, the current status quo and people in power aren't happy about ending the Purge, so they have this whole elaborate scheme to use the Purge. And mind you, it is funny how they do this, but they change the rules a little bit specifically for this year in order to say anybody is eligible to be killed.
Yep, they do a little like, because they used to say that you couldn't kill public officials or whatever, people that are in certain classes, but they're like, actually, this year, anybody can die.
Yeah, and basically Senator Charlie's head is on the block as she has to try to survive with help from her fellow bodyguard and some locals they end up finding. So, yeah, I mean, premise-wise, it did what I wanted to. Dive into, like, how is this affecting the world of politics and everything, and I do think, again, I think this is probably going to be the most political episode we have, because it's kind of impossible to be apolitical, especially whenever...
Because the whole movie is basically this woman is... They're trying to politically assassinate the protagonist, right? And when you move through the entire movie with that plot, it focuses so much on political issues that are relevant to what she's running on and what the bad guys are, which are, I mean, it's going to be impossible to avoid because of how heavy-handed. I mean, they didn't specifically say, like, the bad guys are the Republican Party, but they said they're supported by the NRA. It's a bunch of white guys in suits that attend weird Christo-fascist, like, church rituals. And, like, it's like, and they're talking about big business. Like, the studio couldn't be like, this is a progressive versus a establishment republic. They couldn't use those titles for various reasons, including lawsuits and alienating their audiences, but it's like pretty obvious that's what the film's talking about.
Yeah, it's very hard not to. They don't directly say like, oh yeah, does this remind you of a certain party?
Right.
But at the same point, way.
There's
It's
no
it,
way
yes.
that if you have ever watched the news and then you watch this movie that you're not gonna connect to it too.
Yeah, but it surprisingly pulled off kind of what I wanted because as I mentioned previously, I was like, I would like to dive more into the politics and how they handle it. And while they didn't they didn't dig that deep into the politics thing because at the end of the day, people watching the Purge films usually just want to see the Purge itself and all the crazy, wacky, cuckoo people running around killing people. That's the main thing about the Purge films you have to show. But for what it's worth, I am appreciative that at least they did try to look at it from a political angle. And then there's...
I think it's curious you're saying that they didn't dive into the politics that hard because I thought every single moment was
I
political.
just meant like House of Cards, sort of like pure,
Sure, okay, so like
political
elections
drama.
and yeah.
That's what I was talking about more so.
But
No,
not
they,
like the on the ground issues that people. Yeah, I guess there's a disconnect because a lot of people think politics. They think like, all right, politics are like the election and calling your senators and how many votes. It's like the system or whatever. But
yes, no, that's
what
I
this
was...
dives into the literal like impacts of politics. This is what class issues and people like what politics actually are that people don't just like this guy that owns the deli is getting fucked over by his insurance company or whatever. It's like the whole movie's political in that sense, but not necessarily like let's count the votes since
Yes, no, that's what I was more alluding to.
Yeah.
But no, that's why I was like happy that at least there is like them diving more into politics and talking about it and everything else instead of, oh my god, I gotta survive with like a sprinkle of politics.
Right, with like the messages that they pop on the screen or whatever. But yeah.
Doing that. But no, that's what I was more saying. But I'm saying all that to say that I felt like they successfully pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah.
Pretty well for lore building and really just kind of dissecting this idea further where it feels like there's plenty of meat on the bone. I don't feel like they were scraping the bottom of the barrel whenever it came to content and everything else.
No, absolutely.
And so I was very pleasantly surprised and happy with it, which is funny to say with like the third Purge film that I'm like, I'm pretty satisfied with this.
Well, because I think the first two, I don't want to say danced around certain political issues, but they weren't talking about them like super duper directly. Like the very first movie is like, I mean, it's kind of about elitists going around killing poor people, but also you could definitely watch that movie and just be like, this is the Purge, and like not really think that hard about it or whatever. But like this, by the time we get to this, because then the second film, I think they dived a little bit more into the on the ground impacts and like this is political. But then this movie is like undeniable, like you can't avoid it. It's like, all right, this is about senator is every other word that they say, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You gotta protect the senator.
So yeah, and I mean like story wise, I felt like it went pretty well. I feel like, I think the thing that kills me is definitely the script, which I could talk about later, where there's some stuff where I'm like,
I am so with you.
woo! Yeah,
the plot, like, because the script is both the plot and the dialogue, I guess. The dialogue, I would say, is poor overall.
Yes.
But the plot itself is decent.
Yeah, I think that's good choice. Dialogue poor, but the story is pretty solid throughout, and by the time it reaches to the end of the film, I'm just kind of like, okay, all right. But that isn't to say there's definitely isn't some parts that was just like over the top bad or anything else, because it's definitely
there were some lines that I probably would have cut if I was editing this movie.
Like even in 2016 it's like
or not even just because they were bad jokes that didn't need to be made, like not even bad and like, oh, you can't say that, but just in like that wasn't funny and it was cringe, you know what I mean? Like
there's a lot of cringe. So yeah, I mean, without going into spoilers, definitely good solid stuff overall. And the leading person in the film is the returning character Leo Barnes, played by Frank Grillo, which if you remember, he was in Anarchy, The Purge in the second one, and in all honesty, I was completely fine with him returning. He doesn't bring too much as a character, but at the same point, I don't think he needs to. Yeah,
he is definitely like, I'm the badass guy with gun and ripped stereotype that doesn't really have any I'm the loose cannon cop who doesn't play by the rules, you know. He's that guy in every action movie.
Yeah.
And he's that guy in this movie too, but you know, honestly, that's, you know, for a movie that pretty quickly starts into people are trying to kill you and you have to shoot them. I mean, that's all you need is action hero guy, right?
Yeah, because, like, I know that was, like, sort of, like, the thing where we felt like the overall, like, kind of motivation execution they did of his character in the second film was kind of like, they tried,
yeah, but now that he's got that, like, established backstory that you could just can with a line or whatever, and then they give him a real reason to be around, which is that, like, he's trying to protect this person who's seen as, like, a hero of this movement that's going to end the Purge, you know what I mean? He has, like, a mission, and whenever you put, like, action hero with mission, it works, I think.
Yeah, and so it's one of the weird times where I'm like, I don't need to dive more into this character because this film isn't so much about the characters as it is the world they're having to live in.
That is true, and I would also say the introduction of characters like the senator and also the other community members that they meet that I'm sure we'll mention here quickly or soon is you know, those characters have personality, and so the audience still has characters to latch onto, but it doesn't have to be the like badass problem solver action hero guy. Like he doesn't have to carry also all the caring about characters part of the script too.
Yeah, so I think definitely kind of it's the one time where I'm just like, you know what? I'm glad they brought back a character, helps bring more unity towards the universe as opposed to just another fresh batch of characters.
For sure.
I just felt like it was a good move. Frank Grillo, he's definitely the cast type to be like, you know, badass bodyguard person, and he does it well. He does well in this film. No notes.
Yeah.
Or anything. Like, genuinely, I don't think there's even a moment where I was just like, I felt like his character had a bad thing, because he's like, I'm going from point A to point B, and like, literally, that's it.
Right. The nitpicky things I would say would just be like, you know, I don't think he's banging home Oscar level acting or anything, you know what I mean? So there's some like, you know, a little bit of friction from just that, but that exists across almost every character in this series. I will say the person who plays the senator, what's her last name?
Roan.
Roan. I knew it rhymed with moan. Yeah, Senator Roan or whatever. She actually is great. Just as an actress. I mean, she was in Lost too as Julie.
Oh, nice! I did not know that.
Yeah. But I think she did it well. I think there's a couple others that like have acting chops, but yeah, I don't think this guy's necessarily who I would put on the top of the acting chops pedestal. But it doesn't really matter. I don't think
it doesn't derail it.
Exactly. I don't think it tanks anything for me. It's just like he's not given so many moments where you have to rely on him delivering an Oscar level performance anyways. Some other characters are, and they may or may not hit that bar.
Yes.
But I think he's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I guess we could talk about Elizabeth Mitchell, who plays Senator Roan. I feel like she genuinely does a very good job portraying someone that is trying to enter politics for like a good reason and everything else, to the point that even whenever the Purge is happening, she's like, no, I am going to my home because I'm going to be seen as a hypocrite if I'm hiding in like a deeply sheltered area. And I'm like, let's end the Purge and everything, which, you know, I know the reason why they do that is in order to make the plot escalate to where she's in trouble and everything else, but at least I didn't feel like it was like for a stupid reason at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, like, I need to be like the citizens and go out on the streets.
Right.
You know, like, nothing like that. She's still willing to, like, take security measures. And obviously, it's at the behest of Frank Grillo that there's even more added security and everything else like that. So, looking at that, I felt like it was fine. I never got annoyed with any of the characters. That may be one, because this person's motivations that we'll talk about so fucking but I think he probably is the biggest problem character.
You think so?
Probably, at least for parts. I'm like, what the hell is this man? But Elizabeth is definitely not one of them. She gives like a good solid performance and definitely has to go through like more stressful emotional scenes and everything else, given the predicament that she's put in. But like I said, I mean, it's not Oscar winning, like, oh my gosh, like, beautiful performance. It's like, no, it was really good performance. Believed her. You know, it was just solid good overall and everything. And even even whenever it comes to her own like morals and decision making as the film progresses on, it could be seen a little bit like a little funny, only because she has to repeat it again and again and again just to hammer why she's not doing something. So, but then again, I feel like that's more the dialogue than it is the actual performance and everything.
Yeah, I agree. I think with what she got, she did a great job. Yeah.
But yes, and then we get to, wow, I guess according to IMDb, I'm going to be talking about him next. McKelty Williamson, who plays Joe Dixon, the owner of the deli shop.
Deli man.
My goodness, this performance.
I can't tell if he was ad-libbing half his shit or if that was written and he was just doing the best he could, but he had probably some of the worst dialogue in the film.
Yeah, he did. He did. As Aaron and I were talking about it, he just has some dialogue where I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Come on, man.
Like, it felt so... Like, again, you made this comment while we were watching the film, but basically you're like, it's just a bunch of people in the room smoking a doobie as they're writing the script of stuff. Yeah, and this is even before the character's introduced.
I think I said that specifically about the grandpa dude that's in the thing, where he's like, I'm only thinking about pussy and waffles. And I'm like, who wrote this script? Like, they're just all fucking in a room, just
it's
full of marijuana smoke. Just like, yeah, keep that in,
dude. And it's funny because there are just so many characters that has these dialogues that's so absurd, over the top, and everything else, that it just sort of derails any political seriousness and everything else.
A little bit, yeah.
But at the same point, it's like, I'm on the verge of, this is stupid, I love it, and also, this is just stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I'm right on the fence about that, where I'm like, I mean, it's definitely going to be very memorable, and it's funny, too, because with the dialogue, it's not even with Joe who starts it off. Instead, it's, I believe it's leader Caleb Warrens, the guy, the older guy at the beginning of the film, who she's like, you know... just saying some very heinous stuff and everything else, where he's, man, I'm even having trouble saying, talking about Senator Roan and everything else. Like, I want that, Dad.
Oh
yeah, like throwing out the C word there, and I'm just like, God damn.
Yeah, they went in, and there's a lot of C words in this. Honestly, I think I've heard the word cocksucker in this movie more times than I have in the past decade. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of the words. There was a lot of phallic words being used and everything else.
Which is funny because the character we just mentioned, who has some cringe dialogue, it almost seems like he couldn't say a particular word, which I don't even know that. I just thought it was funny. There are multiple times where he says a N-word, but not the N-word, in a part where you would think you'd just say it, but it was almost like for ratings purposes or whatever. They're like, you can't say that.
Yeah, like they were just very much like, you know, like, yeah, that's the thing with like Joe as well. And so, just the way it said it just sounded so sterile. Yeah. Even though he tried to jazz it up and try to hype it up.
It's funny that they'll say every other word in this movie except for that one. But
so that was just like sort of the thing. And then there's one line that he says whenever they're trapped in a situation. Being surrounded. I know what you're saying. I don't know if I should spoil this or not, but the line was so brazen, and I was just like, good night.
I was like, that one had to have been ad-libbed, right? And then someone just thought it was funny to leave it in, because I can't imagine somebody writing that line in the writer's room and being like, yep, ship that.
Again, it just hits that level of like cringe where you're like, good lord.
Yeah, it's like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, so like that being said and everything, it just, I don't blame the actor at all whatsoever. I just feel like they just really were like, with this character, they thought they were cooking, you know, like Walter White with like, you know, the beakers and everything else with a little droplet.
I honestly wonder if there's just like a better edit out there somewhere that doesn't exist even, but just if this guy just ad-libbed his line and they did like 20 takes and then they just picked the ones they thought were the best but were actually some of the cringiest moments. They're like, yeah, how about this comment about fried chicken? Let's put that in there.
Yeah, and so like it's like his dialogue by far was the most cringiest. There's definitely other people with cringy dialogue.
Which he had good moments. Like, I didn't totally hate this character,
No.
but yeah, there were definitely bad moments too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, cuz like I don't know, like cuz I was thinking to myself like even with this character having like a lot of these moments where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I still prefer him over like the bickering couple from like the last film and everything else."
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%.
That like I felt like this is not a bad character. This is just like
It's just a character with some cringe moments.
yes,
Yeah.
and not to mention his motivation. He is willing to die for that deli.
Yeah, true.
Like he is like constantly like I'm going down with the deli and everything else. It's like, no, what are you doing, dude? Like this is stupid. Like just off he's like, this deli's my life, and I'm like.
But it's him protecting his, that's his motive. He's represents the American dream and how hard you gotta fight against America to save it or whatever, He's fighting against the insurance companies, he's fighting against his customers, he's fighting against all the government that's gonna like I get his character. He says this is my slice of the pie.
Yeah.
That's all I got,
Oh
he can't
my
see a
gosh.
life past because there's, especially in this Purge universe, there does not seem to be any social safety net of life. He loses his deli. He's not deli man anymore, man. He's nothing. He's on the streets with the rest of the Purgers. So
Yeah.
it's, like I get it, but yeah, he's also like, yeah. There's I don't know. I don't even know. I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want to spoil anything. But there's definitely a conflict with some shoplifters that's just silly.
Oh lordy, yeah. I've been prepared to kind of talk about that scenario with spoilers and everything, but I just amped that up to the Purge has like a pattern it has to use of absolutely insane people.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
they've got to meet the market. You meet several individuals who are just absolutely out of their minds.
True.
And everything, and these characters were no exception. But yeah, that being said, Joe was still like enjoyable and everything, and a fine addition. Didn't ruin the film for me, but definitely kind of took me out of the film where I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah,
doing that.
Yeah.
And then we have JJ Soria, who plays Marcos
Marcos
in the film, who also works at the deli and everything, and he's a perfectly fine character. He's like the character that's all reliable, dependable, everything.
Yeah, he's sort of. I mean, to be transparent, I think he's just supposed to represent immigrants in this political
that
narrative.
too.
And he shows how he kind of gets shit done because things run on the back of immigrants in this country. So I think that's what his character is supposed to be, and so he ends up just being like a reliable guy from Juarez or whatever,
Yeah. Yes, I think so. That or Mexico City. It was like,
Oh, that's
around
right.
there.
He did say, yeah.
You're good. I only remember that line, like, where are you from? He's like, Mexico City.
Yeah.
Doing that. What'd you do there? Survive.
Right. What I had to do to survive,
Yeah. But I do think you are correct in the fact that he's more of a representation of like immigration here in this country, which, I'm like, you know what? Kudos to you, Purge election year.
Yeah.
Just hitting those political topics.
I do think
hard.
pretty much every character that's written in that's not like a reoccurring character is to serve like a political purpose, and I think that's his. I think Joe's is supposed to represent the small business owner, black guy that's trying to pull himself up from his bootstraps and showing how America pushes you down over and over, even if you try to do that. So it's like, yeah. If we want to boil him down to like reason why, I think they were baked in the scripts. That's what he is. But honestly, he doesn't have much of a character beyond just being reliable. Guy.
That's basically it. I'd say and everything, which is like nothing to say. He's perfectly a fine character.
Yeah.
Seems suitable.
He's
Zero
seems
qualms.
seems like a nice guy, but doesn't really add a whole lot to the plot.
Yes. Yeah. So, like I said, perfectly fine addition. One person I do feel like was very good, but that's just because she's just a good actress in general, is Betty Gabriel, who played Lainey Rucker, who's basically someone that frequents the deli shop a lot, has, been there ever since she was a kid and everything. Granted, I know she's a good actor because she was in Get Out.
Yeah, the maid in Get Out.
Yeah, and she's a good character because, again, like Aaron mentioned, she rides around in an ambulance kind of van helping people that have been hurt by the Purge to kind of help save them and everything else. So I feel like it's good and everything else. And obviously she has like this like big, deep, mysterious lore where I think it's like, I forget what they call her or something, but basically like Lady Death or whatever. Something like that edgy, which again, I feel like there's nothing to her, like there was nothing really given to her character except a couple of scraps, and just Betty hits it out of the park because she's just a good actress. She's a very good actress. And so, again, I will forget about her like character, but I'll remember her performance. Yeah, so I think that's like a good way to look about it.
For sure.
So yeah, and
she has one cringe one-liner that keeps popping.
Yes. Are you thinking about whenever she steps out of the van with a shotgun?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, that wasn't needed. Like, silence would have been spoken more loudly than just doing that.
But she's a good character, right?
Yes, good character. So it's nothing on her. It's just more so the.
That's the whole movie. Every character has some cringe moments, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess there's other slight minor characters and everything else that you could see in the film. But I don't know. Again, it just is sort of weird because they don't show up that prominently enough until like we've talked about this, that the Purge, really never has like a face of the franchise and everything else, because in the first one it's just like that one young guy who's just interrogating at the doorbell, which again, his performance was great, everything else, but aside from that, I mean, that's all I could say about it. And then the second one, they tried to do it with like Grill Master, where he has the apron,
the dude in the truck
with the hat, and I felt like that was pretty weak. And then in this one, we literally just have Nazi army man.
Who works at behest of rival politician.
Yeah, and I felt like he did perfectly fine. It just and it's nothing with him. It's just like they don't give him a lot to work with, and again, he's just kind of like just bad guy.
Right, he kind of just represents raw conflict. He's not even like he's not the rival senator that's paying him to, he's literally a mercenary that's with a bunch of other Nazis, and they're doing Nazi Gestapo shock trooper shit. And it's like, that's a bad guy force, but it's not like, it's not like you should expect a fucking monologue from him to be like, yes, well, I'm the ideologue here, and this is, it's like, no, they're people trying to kill you. So, like, I think he works as a conflict, but he's like, there's nothing super special about him.
Yeah, I think overall, a majority of the characters, as Aaron and I have discussed and found out, they just kind of stand there more as representation of who do they represent in the Purge world and everything, like what aspect and everything, which is good, because that's what Aaron and I are really interested in. It just unfortunately comes at the sacrifice of, you're not going to get like deep, memorable characters and everything.
Right, and they could have handled it that way, but they didn't, which I think is just a stylistic choice. But I mean, it's important to say that you could definitely have this movie in a way where you care more about the characters and that they still represent conflicts or whatever. But these are a little probably more on the leaning on the conceptual representation type part. But I don't think that's a problem per se. It just it makes you care less about the narrative. And more about the spectacle, which is kind of what a lot of horror is about anyway. So I'm not like knocking it, but it's that's the reality. Yeah, because I mean, it literally also just boils down to like, the higher ups that want, Senator Roan dead. Like literally, they're just sort of like, they represent, higher up politics that want to establish the status quo because it greatly benefits them. Then you have people like Dante Bishop, played by Edwin Hodge, who represents, the rebellion and everything else, the direct rebellion against it. Then you have Minister Edwidge Owens, played by
Coale Secor, who again is the political opponent who is trying to keep the status quo and inject religion. He is very much the religious.
Yeah, he's to tie in the sort of the Christian fascism that we've been seeing rise for the past few decades, and is now in a lot more visible view.
Yeah. And the last one I'll mention is this is so benign, but I do a double take though, is the person riding with Betty Gabriel's character in the van and everything. I guess her name's Dawn. She's played by Liza Colon Zayas, she's in The Bear as one of the main characters. So I was like looking, I'm like, oh, she's from The Bear.
The Bear.
Yeah, good show. Go watch it. Anyways, but yeah, I would argue those are kind of like the main characters and everything else. I know we've talked a little bit about the dialogue, but I feel like it's interesting. Again, as we've mentioned before, I can't decide if I love it or hate the dialogue. I think it's a mix of both.
It is. I think that's a common reaction to cheese as well. Because like you hear a bad pun or something, it's like, oh, I don't know if I love that or I hate that. That's how I feel about a lot of the dialogue in this movie.
Yeah. So I don't know. So I guess we both, thanks to talking about talking about Joe and everything.
Joe
already,
Mama.
yeah. All right, moving on.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I can't decide whether I'm like loving or hating is like the overall like aesthetic of the Purge. Like it's funny because I think it's also kind of going along with like, oh, we got to have creepy unhinged characters, because even with like the two younger gals who are trying to shoplift from the deli and everything else, spoiler alert, they come back at everything. And I mean, they were already acting crazy before then, but whenever it comes to it, I feel like the Purge has like a sort of style they always have to show, because like, yes, this is a Purge movie, just sort of the kind of craziness. And then you have like, this time they're really representing political figures, like you see like Abraham Lincoln, Uncle Sam, Lady Liberty sort of outfits running around. Which it is funny that you mentioned this in particular, Aaron, that the people wearing it were not Americans. They were people visiting.
Well, they were specifically Russians. They were all speaking in Russian accents, if you noticed, and they're like, oh, we love America, and they were all wearing Uncle Sam masks, and I think that was a pretty obvious reference to, at this time of 2016, we knew there was Russian interference in our elections, and Hillary was talking about that all the time. Now, that's one of those things that's aged remarkably well, because that was like, all right, some of these Democrats are getting a little too, Russia, whatever. But it's like, now you look at the White House right now, and you have Donald Trump, that's pretty obviously, there's nothing, I mean, I'll just say it objectively, there's nothing Donald Trump could be doing right now that he isn't already doing that would not benefit Russia more. He's literally stopping the war in Ukraine, he's conceding land to them, he is sucking Putin's dick on the regular. I mean, there's nothing he's doing, there's nothing, if he was literally Vladimir Putin's puppet, there's nothing he could be doing right now that he isn't already doing to help Russia. That's just the reality of it. America has gone from, in the past 20 years or whatever, gone from the Red Scare of being anti-Russia to now siding directly with them, and this is like that was a pretty ham-fisted representation of like, all right, there's a bunch of Russians in Uncle Sam and Lady Liberty masks that are kidnapping this progressive senator, interfering directly in this election. So
you're playing a dangerous game. But yeah, so that's kind of like the sadly that's one of the sadder aspects that have aged incredibly well.
Yeah.
That I don't think they ever intended on aging.
Well, it's one of those things that it's like, we can sit here now in 2025 and be like, wow, that was incredible foresight of them. But it wasn't really foresight. It was sight. You know what I mean? Yeah. They were seeing this. We had the evidence at the time. They were just, I mean, it was, I was surprised as how direct and bold they were at putting it on the screen, despite the fact that I think this series has overall shown progressive values. They've been a little scared to, I think, show them to the extent that this movie does. Like, literally a progressive senator is being kept down. A real Bernie Sanders type senator is being kept down by the American political system that is actually Russians in sheep's clothing. You know what I mean? So it's like, they're pretty direct with it right here, which was also the reality because fucking Bernie Sanders had a good shot to being running against Donald Trump in 2016, but was pushed out by the DNC by elitist politicians in Washington. So it's one of those things that progressivism is always going to get beat down. Candidates that actually want to change the system are going to be the targets of the system, and it's one of those things that's always been true. So it's easy to portray that in a movie because it was true then and it's still true now. It's just much more visible now.
Man, look at you go dissecting the Purge election year.
I was there in 2016 too. I remember.
I was there. Oh my God.
We're quick to forget many things, but I remember.
But yeah, I would say, I guess one of the last things I'll get to, because again, we're kind of running to the point where we can't spoil anymore or anything else like that. I feel like overall, whenever it comes to like the Purge being like a horror franchise, I feel like it's definitely kind of been leaning more action than horror and everything else, which I don't have a problem with. I feel like with the stories they're trying to tell and everything, I'd much rather it lean away from horror. I mean, there's definitely still some horrific stuff like going on. I mean, they literally break out a guillotine in
that's true,
an alleyway, and then
it's also a revolutionary symbol. Just want to point that out.
Yeah.
French Revolution guillotines.
God dang, you're on fire. I'm gonna need a fire extinguisher.
I'm not even trying to be on fire. I'm gonna be annoying and I'm gonna point out every detail because I think this film, literally every frame is like.
Go ahead.
Political.
Yeah, I do like the overtly political image of the Lincoln Memorial, and on the columns it says "Purge" and blood, and there's bodies strewn, and I'm like, there we go.
Yeah, they lay it all out.
But yeah, like overall, the film has definitely hit its mark. I feel satisfied watching this film. I felt like I got more stuff I wanted to get out of the franchise. But I also made sure to settle my expectations, not expecting Citizen Kane and everything else.
We've watched the first two movies. We know that's not the quality we're gonna hit, but it's rather the ideas and and I think they executed them pretty well this time.
Yeah. Aside from that though, dude, anything else you want to talk about with Purge election year?
I'll just say briefly that on some of the more basic filmmaking elements, I think this film also maybe didn't quite hit the bar. And as far as that, when we say cinema, it's not cinema. It's not just the bad acting. I think there were some really overexposed shots, some shitty camera work, some bad editing. A little bit here and there. But I think overall the product was at least at an average movie product for a 2016 movie.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna fault it too much for that. But since we usually mention stuff about sound design and this and all that, I think it did a passable job at all those things. But there were very clear moments where I was like, that's a bad shot. So yeah, it's one of those things. I feel like I should mention it. It doesn't weigh that heavily to my score because this is a fairly lower budget film. But I mean, they're on the third franchise here. They're a third installment of the franchise. They're obviously making money. I feel like it's worth it to point out. My score is going to be impacted by the fact that, it's not the most well-made movie ever.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed on this podcast is a lot of times we'll only mention the very minute stuff like sound design, practical effects, or anything else like that if it's either really good or really bad.
Right.
But with this film, I just felt like it was just fine, but also didn't really excel.
Right.
It just sort of just hit the mark and everything, which is perfectly fine and everything. But I can also see how it's a detriment. Just because something is okay doesn't mean it gets 10 out of 10.
Right.
Yes.
If I was going to rate this movie on just how they made a movie altogether, not anything to do with the plot or actually the experience of watching a movie, but just the technical elements. I mean, this is a pretty average. This is a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. It's definitely just pretty mid-average, you know, which isn't bad. It's just the fact that it doesn't do anything remarkable or unremarkable. So,
But that's always gonna, even if it was Citizen Kane levels of everything else, I'm still gonna have to, fucking, it's like a 7 or 8 in that case. But even if everything else was perfect, because those aspects are gonna drag it down closer to the average.
right. So, yeah, that being said, how about you give us our rating for the Purge election year?
Yeah! I give Purge election year a 6 out of 10. I'll give it a 6. Yeah, a little slightly above average for me. Because, again, I just said, I think all those technical aspects are about at an average. And I think the plot was a little more coherent this time. I thought the world that they built was actually built on some of the more interesting and impactful elements that I've been waiting to see from this series, you know? Like, one of my critiques of the first one is that we stayed inside rich person's house and we didn't see what it was really like. The second movie was better about that, but I felt like the plots and things that they were moving to were inconsequential and weird. This one was like, the whole idea, it was centered around politics and political revolution, but it was, because it had a cohesive point to all tie around, the, like, experience of going from scene to scene in a chaotic fashion was more cohesive and served a larger point for me, such that it boosts it to, like, this is like a good 6 out of 10 movie. I enjoyed it overall. The cringe moments might weigh it down. Some of the subpar movements might weigh it down. But I kind of expected that going into the Purge. Overall, I think this is one of the better Purge entries I've seen.
Yeah, where would you rank it amongst the 3 so far? Because I know you you liked how the second one did do more of what you wanted from the first one, but the other elements kind of weighed it back and everything.
Right.
Like, what you thinking?
Because I think this one does, kind of what the second one did for me on the second viewing, but, like, more correct this time, I guess, in my main brain, in a better fashion in my brain. I think this one is probably my favorite entry.
Oh, nice.
Not to mention, I also full disclosure, agree with the political message behind it for the most part. It's also just a more cohesive film in my experience than the second one was, and it's a more interesting film than the first one was. So it's on the top for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair and just and everything. So 6 out of 10, favorite Purge so far and everything.
I'd say so. I don't remember what I rated the other Purges.
I think you rated it pretty they've been pretty closely grouped. Like even the second one, which you were like,
I don't think this does anything super dynamically different than any of the other Purge movies. The concept's basically the same. It's like there's a night where everyone can kill each other. Woo! But given that, I think the content of this movie is my favorite so far.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally just and fair and everything. I'm kind of with you in the fact that overall, the first 3 films of The Purge, I would pretty much lump them together. Like, if I was to combine the good, the bad qualities of all 3 films, and you were to ask me how it is, I'm like, it's pretty good, pretty all right, like pretty solid. Separating as a whole, I do think I like Election Year certainly better than the second one. Not that I hated the second one, I just felt like the second one definitely kind of lacked in some departments and kind of dragged down the overall viewing experience, but it was still solid. I think I gave it like a 5 or something. And I think I gave the first Purge like a 6, where I really like specific key moments in the first movie, and everything else. But then other stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, this is really dragging it down and everything. So this one overall, I would say is like, I feel like it doesn't hit the highs that I experienced with the first film, but also it doesn't have a lot of low moments like the first film does. Like, it's pretty wavering. It pretty much is like solid throughout. There really wasn't a part where I was like, okay, what are we doing here? It's just like, okay, just chugging along and everything else. So I'm also with you that I give it a 6 out of 10. I'm having a hard time discerning whether I like this one or the first one better. I mean, if I had to say as a whole, probably Election Year. Probably. I still like specific key moments. Like, I felt like they really nailed the creepy factor of the Purge in the first one. And while they do have each film has like a moment of like, oh yeah, I remember that with The Purge. Like whether it's like the one guy staring at the couple at the grocery store, or, you know, rolling the skateboard underneath the car, like stuff like that or whatever. I remember, but yeah, I'd probably be with you. I think the third one, you know, especially for the I don't know if they were trying. Do you think they were trying to intentionally be funny with the dialogue?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
With how over the top and bombastic it is.
Yeah, I think there's certainly moments where they're trying for comedy.
Yeah, so...
But there's also moments, I think, where it was probably taking itself too seriously.
Yeah, so overall, I probably would be with you that I do think Election Year is my favorite as well. I just because it's more consistently solid. Like, I'd rather have a meal that's like pretty consistently solid as opposed to like eating a meal and I'm like, oh man, this is delightful, and then the other one's like, I don't like this.
Fair.
So yeah, I mean, so it's a 6 for me. It does hit the mark, maybe bump it up barely to a 6.5, maybe, but even then that's kind of like really ham-fisting generosity. But it's really solid, and if you couldn't tell, especially if you're just kind of looking at the world and how it is with politics, it's very apt to watch and see sort of everything going on. And it's because we already kind of talked about previously how, you know, you even made the joke, you're like, is the Purge gonna happen soon, do you think? And I'm like, probably, especially since this one's called Election Year, we're gonna find out. So
well, the point of the Purge is that, I mean, I feel like by this point I get what the Purge is supposed to be, at least in the context of this movie, is, I mean, it's showing in a cinematic way, in one condensed day, the violence that our system has on people anyways, and it's because it's entertaining, it's a fun concept or whatever, but like, you know, the stuff that they talk about related to the Purge is all stuff that there are real-life analogous examples for, unfortunately. When you talk about, like, the day before the Purge is supposed to hit, my insurance canceled. Well, the day before Hurricane Katrina hit, a lot of people's insurance got canceled. You know, it's like good luck getting fucking hurricane insurance in Florida now. That's inherently a political issue because that ruins people's lives in their homes. And they're like, you know, and that is we know what causes climate change. We know what makes these storms worse. It's us and our industry and our lack of environmental regulation. But they don't care because as long as oil people can make more money, they don't care if poor people die. You know what I mean? Well, that's more difficult film to make an entertaining horror movie about than it is about The Purge or whatever. But the same shit's happening in The Purge. They start with a boardroom with a whole bunch of people saying we need these poor people to die and kill each other because it makes our profits go up. And they talk about sacrifice and how America's built on sacrifice, but none of the people in that boardroom are very keen to sacrifice themselves. They're sacrificing the poor people. They're sacrificing the politician on the other end of the sign. And so, you know, it's one of those things that this is a system that existed for a long time, and they're taking that violence of the existing American imperialist system and showcasing it through the story of the Purge. They're showing how, you know, it's easy to talk about the Purge, and then I already forget his name. I'm sorry, but the Mexican immigrant character that's in this movie. You know,
you're good.
It's easy to connect him and the violence that he has to do in the Purge on Purge night because, you know, that's the movie that we're watching. He has the rifle, he's shooting the opponent or whatever. But it's what this movie, I think, wants you to do is connect, okay, that experience of him and what happened to him in Mexico City and his sort of shadowy past that he mentions, how he had to catch some charges and do what he's got to do to survive. You know, that is supposed to be also what he's doing on Purge night here in America. He has not escaped the system, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm sorry, I ended up on this soapbox. And
No, you're good.
And I'm way down the line on the soapbox. But I think the point is that, yes, this system that the Purge is supposed to represent is obviously a Hollywoodized, more entertaining version. It would be really boring to sit in a theater and be like, here's a documentary about American imperialism and how it sucks for everybody or whatever. But they showcase through fun storytelling, through a drawl. Let's go watch this fun Purge movie. Let's go watch a horror movie. They showcase, like many other movies have before, the real violent problems in our system today that we are suffering in a way that's palatable for an audience to sit down and enjoy. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and I'm not even going to compete with that. It's just like, it's just like, yeah, Far out.
Right on.
yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm like, I can't even compete with that. You just said that
Oh, man.
too good. So
It's like that meme where he's like, "Hey, little buddy, how you doing?"
oh yeah,
And then at the end, he just, yeah.
yeah, that's how I
That's
feel.
what we did.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, so if you can't tell, we're already going to be basically spoiling the film
Spoiler
here
time.
on out. So yeah, Aaron, that being said, let's maybe, I'm very curious on what's the first spoiler you want to talk about with this film.
I do kind of want to talk about the candy bar girl.
Yeah, go for it, dude. I am ready.
Because that happens pretty early, and I also think it's one of the more whack elements of this film.
Yes.
Is those people to begin with. But yeah, let's start at the start where these schoolgirls come in wearing your little private school outfits. I guess that's supposed to represent some level of wealth or something. I don't know, but they're obviously like schoolgirl bullies that are like messing around in this deli shoplifting. Okay. And then, the deli guy catches him. Well, really, the immigrant guy catches him on the cameras, and then the deli man comes in and is like, I'm going to need y'all to get what you stole. And they're like, if you do that, we're going to call rape. And then, of course, the woman steps in and saves them, and she's a badass chick. That's like, that's how you find out that she actually used to be a badass bitch back in the day. She tells him to get rid of... that whole scene was like, those bullies were probably the worst characters, I think, in the movie. Just like over the top, goofy. Okay, that scene by itself would have been fine or whatever. It's the way that they come back later to
Oh
me.
my gosh, to Party in the USA.
Party in the USA! And this is one of the elements of the film that, like, I'm probably the least confident on my political analysis of, because I was like, why did they write these guys in? But I guess it's literally just consumer treat culture, and they kind of get owned really early.
Yeah, I felt like overall, like, the purpose of them being in the film is, like, we always have those crazy Purge characters.
Yeah.
So we need to have more crazy Purge characters. And, like, oh, they're happy even though they're doing murder, which... Whenever it comes to that Purge aesthetic, I am so, like, again, love-hate on it. Like, sure, I love it, but I hate how much they rely on it and force, and it's like, oh, man.
I agree 100%. It is a great aesthetic, but it almost doesn't make any sense at all at the same time.
And so I feel like they just want, and not to mention they needed an antagonistic force to make it to where Joe and Marcos are needing to defend the shop and be out on the streets and everything.
Absolutely.
Actual world-wise or cinematic-wise.
But I just hate how their whole motivation is like, you didn't let me steal a candy bar. And like, it's very evident in the fact that every time she rolls up, she's like, I'm gonna get that candy bar!
Yeah!
I'm gonna get what's mine! She says it like 5 times, and it's just like, alright, it's...
I don't know if it's like entitlement...
Yeah,
or whatever, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's supposed... I mean, I do think in an abstract sense it's supposed to represent that, the sense of like, like the people that want the Purge, the people that want this violent American political system to continue because they think it's going to benefit them, and then they die immediately. You know what I mean? It's like people that it's Latinos that voted for Trump this last time. It's that's obviously not what they're saying in the movie, but that's the movement. That's the feeling that they're trying to represent, is these people that are working class people that are voting against their own interests, that are interested in the Purge, despite the fact that how does the Purge end for them? All they wanted was their little candy bar. They wanted their little treat. They wanted to vote for Donald Trump so that egg prices got back down, and now egg prices are $15. Now they're splattered on the street because they thought the Purge was going to work for them. They thought, fuck you, get mine. And they got theirs instead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's what that's supposed to represent. But I also think it's primarily, you're right. I think it's because they need a conflict to keep these characters at the shop. I just thought the reason being like candy bar was just kind of silly when everything else in the movie is like a little more explicitly political. But
yeah, like maybe if she had dived more like into a scene, like it's not a big deal. It's like, let me tell you why it's a big deal. And everything, but also
I don't know.
I don't know. Like I said, they both were acting super unhinged, crazy, or whatever, and so you knew they were going to come back, and cause shit and everything else. And it's quickly dismantled.
Because that badass bitch just runs him over and then walks out of the truck and just starts blasting them all with shotguns. And I do love that element was in there, because most of these Purge characters have really impractical Purge strategies. Like, I'm a bear with a machete. And she's like, great.
Yeah, just like blows it away. But again, I do believe there would be actual purgers that think they
100%.
have it all together, but really they're just dumb kids with weapons.
And by this point in the Purge franchise, you know, I kind of buy it more than earlier, because it's like, yeah, I look on social media these days and I see people actively cheering on destructive things every day, things that are fucking them personally over, and they're like, I want this, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess there would be purgers out there that are just like cosplaying, and they're like, this is gonna be a fun. I love the guy that was like, I actually hate him, but I love him that he was like, the Purge is Halloween for adults or whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, the Purge probably would attract a lot of like, for lack of a better term, just like ignorant autists.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not wrong. You're not wrong in that sentiment, to say the least. I think it would, and just those that are just kind of not really analyzing the moral implications that comes with it. They just think like, it's fun.
And I wonder if any of that, I genuinely don't know, but I wonder if any of this film's messaging is a reaction to how the first two films have been received, where people are like, yeah, the Purge sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And I feel like the people making the Purge movies are like, that was not what you're supposed to take away from this movie.
You're like, oh, great.
But I hear people, I mean, unironically in real life, they're like, yeah, actually the Purge, well, probably we need a Purge, actually, you know? And I'm like, really? Like, it's one thing to just say that. It's another thing to actually believe that this would be a benefit to society. And I feel like every movie is supposed to be like, no, this is bad. Actually, the Purge doesn't work for anybody.
Yeah, so I don't know, like, for how stupid it was or whatever, I was fine. And I do not blame either of the young actresses that played like the students shoplifting. Mm-hmm. Like, especially one of them is like literally spitting, like just literally enunciating a word. Yeah. Her eyes are just like leering and everything else.
Both of them are major crazy Bill. Yeah.
Yeah. But too bad they're just dismantled quickly. And after she fucking takes After they are all killed by the shotgun, Lainey has to drop motherfucker.
Right.
Like,
just cringe.
And I was just like, you could have just not said anything, or just like literally blow smoke off like the barrel or something.
Right.
Anything.
Which is funny because, like, yeah, that scene to me showed to some extent, like, here are the performative purgers, which are these people that are dressing up in their little outfits with their masks, and they're going around, and they're like, we're gonna get this candy bar, you know? And then here's, like, what you would actually do in the situation is the bitch rolls up in an armored car and just blasts them. And it's like, all right, we're safe now, you know what I mean? So, like, I thought, because that dynamic already had comedy in it, I thought it was a little bit taken away whenever she, like, then does something performative, which is like cool one-liner, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. So yeah, I don't know, that was definitely a weak element to the film. I would say I felt like they just needed, in case there wasn't enough Purge aesthetic, they're like, here's a whole scene dedicated to it and everything else. But yeah, and then because that's one thing that I do like about the Purge franchise is whenever, like, well, in the last two films in particular, because obviously the first one you only see like outside, and it's mostly just a bunch of teenagers just, you know, doing like stuff children would do, but it's creepy because they have masks on and they're adults.
Right.
But like, there's one person that caught my eye in this film as they're driving around or whatever. He's like, the Purge is about survival of the fittest, and he's drenched in blood, screaming like absolutely ripped or whatever. I feel like the script filmmakers, whatever, have fun. Like, what's an incident we could come up with that happened during the Purge that we have no context to? Like breaking out guillotines, you know, collecting bodies. There's an old woman just sitting next to a body on fire as she's like humming a little ditty.
Yeah, and that's what this film does really well. That is something that is imperative for any genre film, especially in horror, to do well, which is that to world build, to have a great world. So I think that's what keeps people watching Purge films, even if the dialogue might not be up to par, even if the script is cringe, even if they disagree with it politically. I think people will continue watching these films because it's a great world that they build, and they do it with those little moments.
Yeah. One thing I will say that to get the incident to occur, like political assassination and everything else, I just want to mention, like, for how silly and over the top some of the execution was, I felt like genuinely watching it, I believed it. Like, yes, I believe somebody would betray, the others they're working with in order to, get the results that they want and everything. So whenever it came to, like, that one guy betraying Frank Grillo and Senator Roan and everything.
Yeah, that's like what the CIA does.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the department.
Yes,
but the agency was named for.
Yeah, but I do love that Frank was prepared to not only have an escape hatch built into I was about to say Chapel Roan's office.
Chapel Roan's, that's what
Senator Roan's office, and not only that, but have an explosive suitcase to blow it up and everything.
Yeah, that was definitely the Michael Bay production credit right there. Was the exploding suitcase in the room.
But it's funny because they have, like, a lot of these cheesy moments. One other tiny thing, I do love that they have the drone flying. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh. Them. Yeah. Oh my gosh, is this the government? He's like, no, it's just probably one of the purgers. Like, looking at it, it doesn't look like military equipment.
Right.
Which I would believe. Again, I feel like drones were catching on and everything. Like, everyone, literally, I remember going to school during that time, and especially filming with stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, I bought a new drone camera, get these beautiful skyline shots and everything. So I felt like that was also on the rise. So I just found that very amusing and everything else. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about the film because, again, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's doing by the numbers or whatever, where, it's like, okay, the Russians are cleanly taken out by Joe, and Marco's like,
right.
Dual stuff, and then flips over the hood like he's a Jedi with guns or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Doing that, he's like, we could take you somewhere safe, going there. And there's this stupid ass line that I just sticks in my head because it's so goddamn funny, is like, Joe is basically making commentary about, like, Marcos told me about how you're able to win the election. And he's like, no, I don't want to say it. And, Senator Roan's like, oh, no, please, yeah, let me know.
She's like, you saved my life, let me know, yeah.
And the secret, Florida.
Yeah, Florida. Turns out you gotta win a swing state. And this woman that's running for president didn't know that before. And she's like, thank you for your advice. And of course that gets called back to later, by the end of the film when she wins Florida. In the alternate reality that could be. If we had Bernie win. Oh my god. It's funny, it strikes me how much Senator Roan is actually really similar to AOC, which is funny to me because AOC was not in office at the time that this film was made.
Oh yeah.
But like her messaging points not only are basically identical, although obviously focus on this fictional Purge event. But like whenever they show her in the debate stage and stuff, and they explain her brief backstory and stuff, she was like, "This impacted me, and I decided to run." And she's an independent candidate. She's not like a Democrat or whatever. And she runs, and she wins in this landslide. That's exactly how AOC won. That's exactly, I mean, not to get a little too specific of the time, but I mean, AOC and Bernie are rallying around the country, getting way bigger crowds than my big crowds Donald Trump has ever gotten. Literally filling out more overflow than they can fit in the audiences. I mean, I think they were just in Colorado with like 12,000 people, like trying to. Anyway, point is, it's funny to me how much there's a parallel between, like, here's a rising star, young progressive woman that then is just relentlessly attacked the entire time. Like 3 years before AOC's election was put up, and the way that they attack her is again one of those like, oh, they really did a little prediction moment here, like listening to how they talk about her in the boardroom, just instantly being like, this cunt is like
yeah.
Yes, I've seen far right conservative networks, and that is how they talk about her.
Yeah, it's funny seeing that stuff play out. Yeah, and going along with like the rest of the plot and everything else, I mean, it's like they realize the deli isn't safe, because they're about to like break in and everything.
Our
And
hands
so they
are cooked in here.
Yeah. So then they have to leave the deli and then go off trying to find refuge elsewhere. But turns out a bullet that Frank Grillo was shot is a tracer bullet. So
that's how they've been finding them. Yeah, because they hop in the armored triage van, and they explain another fun reference to how politics actually works is they're like, yeah, no, there's like an understanding in the Purge that you don't attack the aid vehicles, which is how it works in war too. Except for then the government just started explicitly lighting up that plane, because that's also how it works in war too. We're not supposed to, but like, I mean, all you have to do is take a little peeky poo at Gaza, and you see that, like, yeah, they just bombed every hospital in the fucking territory, and because Hamas was there actually, and they won't let foreign aid convoys in because they could be Hamas or whatever. I mean, it's obvious the government just wants to fucking just kill all these people because that's what keeps them on top. But it's like, hey, it's fun little moments like that where they're like, yeah, actually, here's how normal things would work normally. Why would you want to kill the medics in the Purge? You never want to kill the medics on a battlefield. And then here comes the government. It's like, let's kill the medics on the battlefield because we don't give a fuck about war crimes. America, I mean, I'll just go ahead and say it. I'm not trying to criticize any specific administration by this, because literally every American president in my lifetime and as far back in history as I've read about has been a war criminal. Like that's how America's been on top, babies. We do this shit.
All the pent up political anger that has been.
Well, I finally have an episode where I can talk about it.
Finally!
Not gonna pop into fucking Halloween 4 and be like, America's problem is.
We wouldn't have this Michael problem if the government
just killed him. But you can see how ineffective the cops are because this detective has never captured. Yeah. I guess I could go on a political rant about any of them. This one is subjectively about politics, so
for sure.
This is my ranting moment.
All right, have at it.
Yeah,
Everything. But it does, that whole incident, whenever they have to pull over to the side or whatever, and they see these guys fighting with swords and axes, which is just funny. It's just funny, just a bunch of dudes hollering. But then they start slapping the vehicle, and then that's whenever Joe drops a line like,
oh, fucking that is funny.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly the exact words.
And it's probably important to quote it verbatim.
That's why I'm worried. That's why I'm like, I'm fucking sweating. Oh my god.
We can just say what the spirit of the joke was, even.
Let me.
But he does drop an N-bomb.
Okay. Oh yes.
To reference a crowd of people that he says are flocking towards the van like a bucket of fried chicken.
yes. I think specifically the quote is, there's a whole bunch of out there, and we're sitting here like a bucket of fried chicken.
Yeah. Which is a wild line given the context that comes immediately afterwards, too, which are like, these are the good guys that saved them.
Yeah!
But yeah, sure. It's one of those moments where I was like, even though it was delivered in a comedic fashion by a black actor, I was like, that just...
It just didn't hit right.
It just didn't hit. I'm not the triggered liberal over here. I don't give a fuck what you say. I think even overtly racist humor can be funny, especially if it's, coming from an appropriate member of whatever. But I literally, the joke just wasn't funny, and it was cringe. It was a cringe moment. I was just like, what is going on here?
I was losing my marbles that they went that far.
Is this the time to make that? And then, but it lessened the blow of the more insane plot point to me, which is that, which I'm happy they went with, because bold choice, Cotton. But that, literally, it was the Crips. It was a gang of Crips, and it turns out Joe had a past where he was a Crip, and it leads to a moment where he's like, okay, these guys help him out. They're like, they help out one of their shot gang members. In exchange, the Crips go light up the fucking Nazis that are following them. And I was like, wow, they really just were like, all right, the Crips are the good guys that bail them out. And then they go underground to this underground. It's great. There's a lot of traditionally bad guy coded groups that are the good guys in this movie, which is weird to me, but interesting. I'm down for it.
Yeah,
It's all under the guise of like, you know, they're doing what they have to survive kind of thing.
yeah. I would I would agree with that. It was definitely just just so funny how, you know, he just gives the whistle and they whistle back and it's
Right.
like, all right, it's all good.
We're good, yeah.
You know, doing that, and their exchange is like, hey, we'll help get rid of this tracer bullet by taking it elsewhere. You help save one of our you know, members that just got injured and everything. And they're like, yeah, of course, deal, as they're heading towards this safe haven, which I do like that the whole area they call a safe zone. Like, this is a safe zone or whatever.
Asylum, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which, of course, is being led by the revolutionist. I already forgot his name. Dante. But yeah, and it's funny because this was the point of the film. Like, I can't even call it like an actual critique or whatever, because I know it's a me problem, but I feel like I've seen this exact scene, like, this is a safe haven for people that have been hurt, you know, and I'm just like, I feel like I've seen this same scene played out multiple times. Like, who are these people? Volunteers, just people trying to help end this, you know,
Grassroots
nightmare.
community. Yeah, I bought it in this one because it was about like progressive community policy or
For
whatever.
sure.
So there's all these community groups.
That's why I'm
even
like-
the Crips, you know, that are coming together to fucking to be the momentum of this political revolution.
Yeah, mind you, this is not a heavy critique. Like, there's
but
no...
I'm 100% with you, and I'm also with you in the sense where they're like, this is a safe haven. I'm like, all right, this place is getting raided. Like, counting down until the military shows up. Yeah.
But I do like how there ends up being kind of a bigger reveal with it, which honestly, kind of thinking about it, I was like, you know what? I like this. I like what they did. And the fact that Dante is having a plan of his own, which is to assassinate the other member of Congress running for president,
Right.
who's trying to enable the purge. And they're like, we are going to assassinate him.
And he's the one that lifted the restrictions on the purge to begin with, right? In the beginning of the boardroom, where he said you can kill political assassins, right? And of course, he was lifting that so that he could kill his opponent, Chapel Roan, but
which provided the window of opportunity.
Right.
Like, all right.
where they were like, okay, which is funny because there's another fun political prediction they did when, I mean, Donald Trump explicitly went through the Supreme Court last year to give himself the power to kill his political opponents. He made that legal or whatever, and then now, you know, we're now sitting in a situation where he has complete presidential immunity from being, you know, so like it's like, you know, it's fun how these things parallel each other. But you know, if this movie happened in real life, then Joe Biden could have just you know,
Yeah.
could have done a little. I mean, because it just gives the president the power. That's all it does. So this movie is like literally it gives everybody the power. This one is like, all right, this gives everyone the power. You can actually kill politicians now. Previously, they were they're protected class or whatever, but they lift this for the purpose of there are some specific politicians that we legally want to get out of the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why they bring in the Nazis to go do it. You know, it's not the first time America has funded some Nazi paramilitaries to do their bidding. In fact, that's kind of throughout history we've been pretty keen to fund radical paramilitary groups to do our bidding because we don't want to go do it directly because then the government's doing that. So it's like, you know, we'll pay these Nazis to go do it.
Oh, the political richness of this film.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we do all the time, baby. I mean, that's you know, I won't get on my platforms about all of our conflicts in the Middle East. The fact that South America is destabilized to begin with is because America routinely does coups or funds rival, you know, groups that are trying to overthrow the government or whatever, funds them, gives them weapons, gives them the ability to do this to destabilize people like governments in South America that have politics that we don't agree with, i.e. left-leaning politics throughout most of history because we were worried that they would align with communist Russia. And so we have done many a funding of paramilitary groups with the purpose of political assassinations. We're pretty bad at political assassinations too. It's why we never killed Castro, despite trying for many years. I urge you to go like pop on YouTube or Google or whatever and look at all the funny ways we tried to kill him with an exploding cigar. We tried like 200 plus assassination attempts on Castro and never succeeded because we're really bad at it. But that's why we just fund other military groups to do our shit too. But anyway,
all right,
that's my little fun political aside once again.
Fun fact for the day.
Yeah.
Did you know?
Yeah.
They tried to kill Fidel Castro in over 200 ways.
Including an exploding cigar.
Oh my God. Yeah. But I do like, I don't know, like I said, I do like that Senator Roan, whenever she learns about this, she's like, you can't kill him. But it's not on the grounds that it's morally wrong, but more so, they will literally make him a martyr.
Well, it's both. It's both, which I think is smart to have both those reasons in there, because I might not buy just one or the other, because I'm like, bro, these people just kidnapped you and try to sacrifice you at a fucking Christo-fascist death cult of like, we're gonna kill the political opponent with this fucking syphilis-looking ass priest dude is gonna say, like, it's just... I mean, and then even after all that, she's like, we can't kill him. I'd be like, no, kill his ass, bro. Like, it's not even her planning the assassination attempt, but her reason is, yes, not only would it be the wrong thing to do, which I think is a bitch-ass argument.
Yeah.
But it's also, like, you know, you're going to make him a martyr, you're going to win. And I understand that, too, because whenever, you know, Donald Trump survived a couple assassination attempts, the first one, when his ear was grazed, which I thought was a funny accidental thing whenever the bitch's ear gets grazed in the beginning.
Yes, that was so funny.
I was like, God damn.
Listen, Gabe.
That guy was the sniper in Pennsylvania, apparently. He could have taken out ears. No, but whenever, you know, I mean, like, that was a distraught political moment for a lot of analysts on the left to be like, wow, Donald Trump just won the election because they're going to make a martyr out of him because somebody tried to kill him. You know what I mean? And he did. How much influence that had over it is debatable. But, yeah, it's one of those things where, well, I see the logic. I see the logic behind her argument. Although, if I was going to be real with it, I would be like, yeah, well... There's one guy in charge of keeping the Purge intact, which is genociding, like, the fucking poor people in America. I don't think it's that bad if he gets Luigi. Do you know what I mean? You kill one to save 1,000. I'm a little utilitarian about that. But, you know, that's not the politics of the movie, so I'm not gonna sit here and debate that. But it's, I do think it was. I like that they gave both reasons. Yeah. So if it was just on that Batman shit, I think that would have been bitch made.
I do think it is funny that in order to like have like, you know, the deli squad, as I'm going to call them now, be out on the streets to help out. They have Joe be like, I'm going back to my deli or whatever, and it's like, what? Like, why at this point are you going back to the deli?
Right.
Like, I thought you just were fine with letting it go. He's like, nah, I'll go. And so then they're all going, and it's like, as soon as it goes bad, we're turned back. It's like, okay, yeah, you got a deal. And of course, they got to throw back to that impeccable line of being a fan of Pussy and Waffles.
Right.
And they're just cackling at it. Like, they clearly thought, like, this was their favorite joke of the whole script.
Right.
And everything.
People are going to love the Pussy and Waffles line, so let's call back to it.
Yeah, and so they manage to escape until they're hit by a van, and then they take away Senator Roan and everything. And I do like that they're having like this
Armored
sort
police
of
van, by the way, is what they're hit by. And just to point out the politics of the situation, armored police van. Then a bunch of Nazis come out and pull them in.
There you go.
Police are Nazis. Just saying. All right, continue.
Yeah, no. Please inject however much you need.
Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. Was Tom Morello predicting this shit? No, he was looking at it. The Klansmen are fucking Nazis. They fill out police force. Sorry, this is the episode where I get to say it. If you were bullied little white nerd in high school and you need power over someone and you're a piece of shit, then you become a police officer.
So they end up taking Senator Roan. They end up taking Senator Roan to a church, which I'm like, yeah, this hits the aesthetic. And of course they use the Purge as sort of them cleansing the world, and not only that, themselves and everything. Right. Which again, I'm like, yeah, let's inject religion, politics into this.
Right, because, I mean, we've been doing that. I mean, ever since In God We Trust, baby. We don't have real, separation of church and state. We've always been founded on Christian principles, quote unquote, which are then used to excuse incredible violence. We can see that now with how the Christians want to do things that are explicitly talked about against in the Bible, or you want to deport migrants out of our country, or we want to do unspeakable violence, like the violence against trans people. You will see a lot of people that claim to believe in God cheering on that violence. So that's all that scene was, I think, was reflecting that political reality, where they used the excuse of the Bible, as it always has been through time. I mean, back in slavery days, people were using the Bible as an excuse as why we need to have slaves, because the Bible demands that you have slaves in Egypt or whatever. So, I mean, they've always used the Bible to talk about shit that it does not talk about, you know what I mean, to justify horseshit in our government.
Yeah.
So that's another salient point by the movie, is to make this a weird Christian fascist ritual where they're like, yes, sacrifices must be made, and just like you sacrifice to God, but it's, of course, it's none of them. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene looking ass people clapping in the audience. It's, their political opponents that they drug on stage, and this drug addict that they're like, he's a bad guy, but he's going to redeem himself because we're going to kill him for God or whatever, and for the Purge.
Yeah, it's something else. And then, of course, before, Senator Roan is killed, Deli Squad comes in, guns a-blazing, because they take the tunnels, which is how they're able to sneak to the church.
Those dang tunnels.
Yeah, I know. Those tunnels founded by our founding fathers at churches.
Yeah, I do think it's funny that they're the bad guys in this movie were called the new founding fathers. But
yeah,
I mean, pretty overtly like Tea Party politics ass shit, but yeah.
Yeah, it's whatever. They have a giant shootout. It goes on for a while, and then they manage to try to escape, and it turns out they actually captured the minister that is running for president, and Dante has the moment to kill him, and of course, Senator Roan's like, please don't do it, please, and has a moment where, the minister's like, go ahead, pull the trigger, purge, and so Dante's like, God damn it, now I can't purge.
Right.
And so then he keeps him alive. And just because we need a little bit of extra tragedy sprinkled to do the story, Priest Man comes out wielding shotgun, firing away
Right.
and everything. And
the Dylan man.
And he tries to take out, Senator Roan, but then Joe dives in to take the hit.
And they do a total what you say. Where they're like blasting each other from across the room.
Yeah, and so then, of course, Joe looks to Marcos. He's like, the deli is yours.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't say that.
Basically does.
He
though.
does, essentially.
That's the spirit
Yeah,
of it.
so it was just goofy and everything else. And so after that incident, it cut to a few months later to basically the election kicking off. And
Landslide.
yeah, it's a landslide. Florida, baby, we bagged it.
Florida.
And then of course you pointed this out in particular, Aaron, about like how at the end of the film the people that are for the purge started rioting in the streets.
Yeah, they started talking about that on the news, and they were like, yeah, but the people that wanted it are doing violent protests and killing police officers. And I was like, whoa, they're doing a January 6th.
Neat.
Right. Again, January 6th, where, people were upset about the results of the election. These far-right people that have been, including paramilitary Nazi violent groups like the Proud Boys, were stormed the Capitol and killed police officers. And it's like, wow, that happened 4 years after this movie was made. You know what I mean? But they talk about it. Because it's almost like all this shit is always happening.
Yeah, and
shitty system.
that's the magic of Purge election year, baby.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah,
Simpsons predict Purge election year.
Yes, yeah, that's... Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because, like, towards the end of it, even though, like, I rated it 6 out of 10, if people that are worried about the world of politics or whatever, or very concerned about it, I think they'll get a little bit of amusement out of this film.
It's at least cathartic in some. I mean,
Yeah.
I would be lying if I said I didn't watch some like Indiana Jones and stuff recently just to watch some Nazis dying. But
That's fair.
yeah, this is another movie where on a Nazi dying scale, it's 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Nazis do die.
They do, especially having like a big final boss between Frank Grillo and Nazi Man.
Right.
It's just
Which
so
was-
damn funny.
And it was very action movie coded, where of course they run out of bullets and then they have to
Knife
knife fight. And then turns into a fist fight in the parking lot, and for some reason everybody else is gone. It's just these two guys brawling it out in the parking lot.
Yes, like video game ass logic.
But that's the movie. It's a fun time, you know. It's got all the tropes.
Yeah, so anything else you need to tack on talking about this film?
Shit, man. No, I think I've said enough.
All right. Well, I
I've
think
been yapping this whole time.
I didn't even really have anything extra to add, so I'm glad you got that stuff to it. So next film we're going to be watching is the original film, where we actually watched the remake earlier in the podcast. And the remake was done of a Japanese film. The American remake made by Gore Verbinski.
Ringu.
Yes.
Ringu.
yes. Yeah, it is indeed Ringu and everything
Ringu
else
Starr.
that we're. Yes, yeah. My favorite Beatles member.
Yeah.
So, well, that was so damn quick. I don't know what to say except.
Imagine Ringo coming out of your TV.
That's...
Hey,
Ringo.
I played the drums for the Beatles. I don't know what he's saying. I don't know enough about Ringo to continue this bit.
I mean, that's about accurate.
Right.
That's about accurate. We'll cut it there. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see y'all again next time when we're popping the scary with Ringu.
Ringo.
I'm gonna have nightmares now about the Beatles. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @CoalkirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're poppin' the scary.